Hello, everybody. My name is Jessica Stone, and I was recently hired as a public health consultant here at Toast the Host Catering. I would like to take a minute to thank you all for inviting me here to talk today. As the outdoor party season comes near, I think it's very important that we refresh our knowledge on foodborne illnesses and what we can do to avoid them. This is a brief outline of the things that I'm going to cover in today's talk. First, I find it important that we go ahead and define some terms, specifically food poisoning and food illnesses. Next, we're going to talk about the health effects of foodborne illnesses. What causes them, what are the symptoms, and what groups of people are at risk. Last, we'll discuss our most important topic of prevention, where we'll talk about the 5 keys to safer foods, how to be food safe, and the HACCP model. So let's discuss food poisoning and food illness. Food illness is a really broad term. When people say food illness, they're usually referring to something that falls into one or two categories. The first category is food intoxication, which is caused by toxins in food that are ingested. These toxins may come from bacteria growing on the food, chemicals in the food, heavy metal contaminants, or a variety of other substances. With intoxication, symptoms usually occur within hours of ingesting the contaminated food. The second category is infection, which is caused by bacteria, parasites, or viruses. Now, examples of infections can include things like salmonella, norovirus, and listeria. Infections usually take much longer to produce symptoms and can occur up to 10 days after eating the infected food. So therefore, when people are discuss food poisoning, they usually are referring to an illness that was caused by intoxication. So let's start talking about some of the health effects of foodborne illnesses. While the American food supply is among the safest in the world, the federal government estimates that there are about 48 million cases of foodborne illnesses annually. That's the equivalent of sickening 1 in 6 Americans each year. And each year, these illnesses result in an estimated 128,000 hospitalizations and 30,000 deaths. The symptoms can be numerous and varied, with the symptoms ranging from relatively mild discomfort such as diarrhea and stomach cramps to very serious life-threatening illnesses such as kidney failure. So now let's talk about some of the groups that are at risk. Although anyone can get a foodborne illness, some people are more likely to develop one. These groups can include young children, older adults, pregnant women, or people who are immunocompromised. And when I say people who are immunocompromised, I mean people with immune systems weakened from medical conditions, such as diabetes, liver disease, kidney disease, organ transplants, HIV/AIDS, or from receiving chemotherapy or radiation treatment. It may seem silly for a catering company to be concerned with the groups that are at risk for foodborne illnesses, but I think it's very important for us to all keep these groups in mind. While I know you all don't plan to intentionally put out contaminated food, I think that if, for example, the company is catering a party for really young children, it's important to keep in mind that they are an at-risk group so we can take those extra precautions to make sure that we put out food that is safe. So now that we've talked about the definitions and the symptoms and who are at risk, let's start talking prevention, which is most important for us. When we talk prevention, it is inevitable that we're going to discuss something called the danger zone. Leaving food out too long at room temperature can cause bacteria to grow to dangerous levels that can cause illness. Bacteria grow most rapidly in the range of temperatures between 40 degrees Fahrenheit and 140 degrees Fahrenheit, and they double in number in as little as 20 minutes. This range of temperature is what we call the danger zone. We never want to leave food out of refrigeration for over 2 hours. If the temperature is above 90 degrees outside, food should not be left out more than 1 hour. We want to be sure to keep hot food hot, meaning at or above 140 degrees Fahrenheit. We can do this by placing cooked food in things like preheated steam tables, warming trays, and/or slow cookers. And we want to be sure to keep cold food cold, which is at or below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. We can do this by placing the food containers in containers on ice. Still talking about prevention, another important tool to keep in mind are the 5 keys to safer food, which were put forth by the World Health Organization. These keys are: 1. Keep clean. Wash hands before handling food and often during food prep. Wash hands after using the restroom. Wash and sanitize all surfaces and equipment used for food prep, and protect kitchen areas and the food from insects and pests. 2. Separate raw and cooked. And when we say this, we mean separate raw meat, poultry, and seafood from the other foods. We want to use separate equipment and utensils such as knives and cutting boards for handling raw foods. And we want to store food in containers to avoid contact between the raw and the prepared foods. 3. Cooked thoroughly. When we say this, we mean we want to make sure food is cooked thoroughly, especially meat, poultry, eggs, and seafood. We want to bring foods like soup and stews to boiling to make sure that they have reached at least 70 degrees. And for meat and poultry, we want to make sure the juices are clear and not pink. I think the safest route for us to go as a catering company is to make sure to use thermometers to check to make sure that we have reached those safe temperatures. 4. Keep food at safe temperatures. This is a lot to do with the danger zone that we previously discussed. So, don't leave cooked food at room temp for more than 2 hours. Refrigerate promptly all cooked and perishable food. Keep cooked food hot prior to serving. Do not store food too long, even in the refrigerator. And don't thaw frozen food at room temp. We want to take those foods from the freezer to the refrigerator to make sure that they thaw out safely. And 5. Use safe water and raw materials. We want to make sure we use safe water, and if we're not sure if it's safe, we want to go ahead and treat it to make it safe. Select fresh and wholesome foods. We want to wash fruits and vegetables, especially if eaten raw. And we don't want to use any food beyond its expiration date. Still on prevention, we have another model. It's very similar. It's put out by the USDA called the Food Safe Campaign. Being food safe means preventing foodborne illnesses through 4 easy steps. Clean, wash hands and surfaces often. Separate, don't cross-contaminate your foods. Cook to proper temperatures. Chill, refrigerate promptly. This is another model for prevention called the HACCP model, which was actually recently adopted by our very own company. The HACCP model is the Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Point model. This is a systematic approach to identify, evaluate, and control food safety hazards based on the following principles. 1. Conduct a hazard analysis. 2. Determine the critical control points. 3. Establish critical limits. 4. Establish monitoring procedures. 5. establish corrective actions. 6, establish verification procedures. And 7, establish record keeping and documentation procedures. The HACCP model is designed for use in all segments of the food industry, from growing, harvesting, processing, manufacturing, distributing, and merchandising to preparing food for consumption. The success of this model system depends on educating and training not only management, but employees in the importance of their role in producing safe foods. This should also include information of the control of foodborne hazards related to all stages of the food chain. The underlying theme of this model is simply for all employees to be able to recognize where contamination is possible or those critical points and how to prevent that contamination. This is an example of a flow diagram for the production of frozen beef patties. So here we see from receiving the beef to grinding, mixing, forming, cooking, freezing, boxing, distributing, reheating, and serving. Within a flow diagram, and everything is listed out in this manner, it's easy to identify where those critical points are. So, for example, there could be cross-contamination with forming the patties, with freezing and reheating. They could be in the danger zone. Bacteria could grow. But with everything listed like this, it's easy to identify those points where contamination could become possible and make sure that you don't allow that to happen. We've reached the end of our discussion. So, in conclusion, our most important job when it comes to foodborne illnesses is prevention. We can prevent illnesses by making sure we do our jobs to keep our kitchens clean, our work areas clean, and being aware. Being aware means being aware of the food temperatures and the points where contamination of foods could happen. I want to thank you for allowing me to come here and talk today, and I wish you all a very successful outdoor party season. These are the references that I used. I pulled my information from places that were reputable, such as the North Carolina Public Health and Human Services, the World Health Organization, the FDA, and the USDA.